What's going on, U.S. History kids? Back at it again, another short video coming your way right now. We're going to look today at the areas of reform during the progressive movement and changes that occurred during this time period. Again, it should be a pretty short video, maybe only 10 minutes, so let's get into it. So let's look at the political reforms that occurred. So some of the problems. There were political machines. Bosses ran cities and were corrupt. Think of people who hold unyielding amounts of power. Think of like a Thanos, right? Just a very all-powerful figure. And and things are very corrupted, like the burning of votes, the rules to vote. You kind of have like gangsters, kind of outside the polling offices. You're making deals with crime lords. Just really messy on so many different levels. You could read books, take whole classes on political reforms during just this time period in this country. Too much to get into kind of in COVID condensed classes, but there were a lot of corruption, specifically in the cities. A lot of politicians often got bought off by the rich company owners. Fun fact, that still really happens today. To really win an election, it kind of comes down to like how much money you're getting. For example, Prop 22, you probably saw a lot of commercials about that here in California. That dealt with like, should Uber and Lyft drivers be independent contractors, which Uber and Lyft want, or should they be full-time employees and get benefits and be able to go on strike and unionize and get other things, right? Uber and Lyft and a lot of those other gig economy type of companies paid a lot of money to make sure that those workers, when we voted as a state, stayed independent contractors. Because if we had voted that they had to be employees, that means Uber, Lyft, all these companies, they'd have to provide benefits. They'd have to provide all these extra things for their workers, minimum wage, pay them more, right? And that's going to cost them money. And they don't want to have to do that. And fortunately for them, Uber and Lyft, it worked out. They paid a lot of money to make sure that that proposition, that those workers were, not considered employees. So a loss for workers, but it'll be interesting to see what other states do about that. Maybe it'll come back to California one day. We'll see. Here are the reforms. So city managers were appointed to kind of end political machines, more independent people that were kind of making sure that there was a diverse group of ideas, more freedom with the vote. We passed an amendment on the federal level, the direct election of senators instead of kind of like the indirect election, how it used to be done. There's this idea known as the Wisconsin's idea by Bob La Follette. We don't really need to get into that. We just don't have the time. And so let's see, forgot how many animations there are in here. The Wisconsin idea is just, pretty much just more laws to help protect like voters' rights and politics. Here's some political cartoons that kind of illustrate, right, the different big money companies affecting kind of legislators and city governments. So they're the big like chunkuses, the big boys in the back. And then on the floor, this would be like the government, right, trying to govern. And they keep all those guys on the bottom, they're looking over their shoulder, right, because they're looking at what their big bosses, the money donors, are doing and how they're viewing their actions. You kind of have the big mobster kind of by the ballot. There's a friendly reminder. It's like, hey, Mr. Tomei, who you voting for? Yeah, it'd be a shame if something happened to your brand new RAV4 if our candidate didn't win. Maybe you can help us out. Some like super greasy mobster like vibes. And that's how it used to go down in this country. We have laws about that now. Let's look at social reforms. A lot of problems. A lot of racial inequality, a lot of gender inequality, not a lot of protection for kids. So a lot of issues. But here's kind of what we knocked out. First off, we limited child labor. So now you kind of have to be 16, or if you're younger, you got to go like get a work permit, right? You got to be like 15 and a half. I'm not exactly sure. It was a while ago. I was one of the first kids in my high school to get a job. Hashtag grind don't stop. women finally got the right to vote 150 years after this country was founded. That was with the 19th Amendment. We also banned alcohol for a while with the prohibition. We're going to talk more about that kind of in the roaring 20s. It actually was not a good idea, and it got reversed. We started setting more support for immigrants and the poor. And then a lot of Black leaders, and we're going to look specifically at Black leaders as well in the next unit, look to end segregation, so like the Jim Crow laws and whatnot, improve voting rights across, especially in the South, and tried to put an end to lynching and really stomp out the KKK. We're going to look a lot more at this stuff in the next unit, but again, just giving you the skinny, these are the reforms that kind of went down. Let's look at education. Hashtag the reason you guys are in school, instead of looking like that sad little boy who's been, sweeping the floor probably all day. Education 100 plus years ago wasn't good. Very few public schools. Education often was something that only could be attained by the wealthiest elite groups of people. And in general, most children just weren't in school. But here's what changed. We finally mandated that kids had to go to school. So if you're angry about why we're in school, blame the progressives. You'll also notice, look at that picture in the bottom left, that's a classroom. The idea of teaching actually hasn't really changed much since the progressive era. So in a lot of ways, kind of what we're doing right now is the greatest change in educational history in this country. So we're kind of like the guinea pigs or the experiment going on right now. I think very soon we're probably only going to have 4-day work days, or for you guys, 4-day school weeks, 3-day weekends. That'd be dope. College attendance increased hugely over this time period, about 400%. That's a lot. A lot of government jobs were given to experts, like we got to trust science and whatnot. These are the most educated people of our society, the people that were going to college, right? Not just like my cousin Jim, who like kind of knows this thing about how taxes work. Sure, he's going to be our chief finance person. No, we're going to give it to college educated individuals because these people are the experts. They know what they're doing, right? And then we're going to look at economics and kind of the business aspect. A lot of problems going on. Companies and owners could really do anything they wanted, and there was very limited, almost no government regulation. This political cartoon is supposed to be Standard Oil, like this very mean looking octopus, like covering the entire country and controlling like the government and the White House and the different branches of government and politicians, because it was such a powerful company. Typically, because we're a capitalist society, the idea of one company being the only company, the only choice, the most dominant choice, it isn't good, because again, capitalism is all about competition, survival of the fittest. The best companies drive innovation. The competition, right, forces technology to advance, forces humans and us to work harder, get more creative. That's the whole idea of capitalism. And so when you only have one company, right, you kind of get what happens in Cuba: stagnation, limited progress, limited innovation, kind of more of a lackadaisical approach to work, less innovation, right? You already probably said that. So a lot of reforms happened. We're looking at a lot of the regulation of big businesses. So we outlawed monopolies and trusts. I'm going to talk about that in a second. We limited the workday. Before, you used to work 14, 16, 18 hours. Now you're working 8 hours. Worker compensation laws. So now like employers had to be responsible and provide like protection for their workers in different ways. You also saw a lot more unions kind of come about. Consumer protection laws to inform the consumer about like, warning labels, things like that, nutritional facts. So that's why we have like the Food and Drug Agency, we have the Meat Inspection Act. That was probably a part of your homework that you read. And now we're going to talk, last slide, about Standard Oil and the breaking up of monopolies and trusts. So here's kind of the case study. I'm going to try and run this down very quickly. In the 1900s, oil companies began to take off. A lot of oil companies. And that's because people were finally driving cars, right, and buying them. So now we needed, gas stations. Standard Oil was the most powerful of these oil companies early on. And they figured out this way to kind of make sure that they were going to stay the most powerful oil company. And they were backed by that, by that really rich guy, John D. Rockefeller. So they came up with this idea, and it's like the trust. And I have that word highlighted there. And so the trust was with other oil companies in America. And so pretty much here's how the deal works. The trust is like if I have Mr. Tomei's oil company, and then like there's Mr. Elliott and Miss Perez's Elliott or Miss Perez's oil company. I make deals with them. I say, look, hey, I'm more powerful than you, but look, I gotta make sure because America wants to outlaw monopolies. I'm like, I tell them like, hey, I gotta make it look like we're competing. So we're gonna like secretly work together. I'll give you a smaller cut of the profit. I'll get the bigger cut of the profit. And you're probably wondering, well, why wouldn't like Mr. Elliott or Miss Perez like snitch on me, right? Or try and fight back? I was too powerful. I could drive them out of business. An offer they couldn't refuse. They had really no other option. Any company that didn't want to work with the OG, the big old oil company, you were going to go out of business, right? Better to have business and be able to put food on the table for your family, right? Even if it's not a lot, than try to fight the big dog and lose. Eventually, though, this came exposed, and the government came in and said, yo, Standard Oil, you can't be doing this. And they forced Standard Oil to split up into different companies. Some of the companies we see today, infamously Chevron, they're kind of in our backyard in Richmond. If I was teaching this class in Richmond, a lot of your parents might be working at the refinery. It's a big employer there. Exxon and Mobil, which is more in the South, that's a pretty big oil company as well. They were all created out of Standard Oil. And that's kind of the idea behind trusts and monopolies. And I got to give it to you pretty quickly because it's a short class, a short year, a weird year. I got to really condense it down. But that's pretty much the skinny. But besides that, that's really all I got for you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. I never know how to really end these things well. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.